Yes.
Yay! Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Queens Public Library's interview with an author. I am Professor Gail Lewis, and it's my pleasure to be here today to interview such amazing people who are from right here in Queens. So, before we get started, I would like to shout out some people who made this possible. First of all, hi, Casper. Did you have anything you wanted to tell us about the library and all the exciting things that you have going on there?
Well, thank you. We do have a brief announcement. Um, so during this year's celebration of Women's History Month, Queens Public Library is celebrating the leadership, strength, and solidarity of women identifying individuals in all walks of life. Be inspired to unleash your power within and make your visions for the future a reality. For upcoming programs, book recommendations, and more, visit queenslib.org/WHM 2023. And the Queens Public Library's mobile app now translates to over 90 languages. So feel free to check out the Queens Library app available for Apple, iOS, and Android. Um, and also at Camber Heights on Thursday at 3 o'clock p.m., we're going to have a magic show for kids and families. So
Hmm,
hope to see all of you there. Thank you
thanks,
so
Casper.
much.
Also, if you could drop that link in the chat, that would be awesome. So everyone could have it. And also, while I have you, Casper, can you tell us a little bit about maybe Let's Go Mets, the Mets programming that's going
Yeah,
on at the
thank you.
library
Thanks.
starting today?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great point. So starting today, we are giving out Mets library cards. So if you're a fan of the Mets, you can get a library card for free. Even if you already have a regular library card, you can come in and replace it with a Mets library card. We have free hats and t-shirt giveaways at the library. So it's until supplies last. And also, I think the Mets won their first championship in 1969. So the 69th customer to get a Mets library card will get 2 free tickets to see a Mets game. So you should come on by and get your library card, and you might get lucky and win those tickets as well. So thanks so much. That's a good point.
Thanks so much, Casper. And I would also argue that you'll get lucky just walking into the library
Yes.
because it's filled with so many amazing resources for us here in Queens.
Well said. Thank you.
Thanks, Casper. And thanks so much for all your support and continued programming that you do. Someone just said that you are indeed one of the best, and we wholeheartedly agree. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, brought to you by Queens Public Library. I'm so excited today to do this author's talk with a local author and a kind of local illustrator. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce the author of Annie and Juneteenth, Miss Aletta Seales. Good afternoon, Miss Seales.
Thank you so much, Gail Lewis.
And
I am honored to be here and honored to be here with the illustrator of Annie and Juneteenth. I
yes,
am also honored, I'm so sorry, I'm honored to be here with two of my NAUW sisters who will dramatize parts of Annie and Juneteenth.
indeed. That is today's agenda. So we're meeting Miss Aletta Seales. She is the author of Annie and Juneteenth. With her and also with us on the panel, you will find illustrator Artkina Celestin. Hi, good afternoon, Artkina.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thanks so much for joining us by way of Maryland today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Also on the panel today, and you'll meet them again a little bit later, are Dr. Yvette Morgan. Good afternoon, Dr. Yvette.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining.
And also local mom here in Cambria Heights playing the part of Annie, Melinda Cashwell. Good afternoon, Melinda.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me.
So Melinda and Yvette will be dramatizing a scene from Annie and Juneteenth. after our interview. So let's get started, ladies and gentlemen. Miss Aletta, this is your very first children's book and your very first published work. How do you feel about that?
I am overjoyed, but actually, I have written many manuscripts. First, you write the manuscript, then you share it with people who review it and give you feedback. And then next, it's up to you. You decide whether you want to have it illustrated. Some authors are also illustrators, but I had to search for an illustrator. And I'm so grateful that I found Artkina.
Absolutely. So walk us through your writing process. I know that you have been keeping a journal, you've been writing most of your life. And so then COVID hit and you were at home with your manuscripts and you went online and you found a webinar. And that ultimately helped you to get to where you are. So walk us through that.
Yes, thank you so much, Gail Lewis. During 2021, all of us know that COVID hit and we were shut in. While I was shut in, I looked at various webinars to keep busy, to have something positive. And it was safe because it was online. One of the webinars was Lee and Low Publishing Company, and they had an interesting title, Using Literature to Teach About Juneteenth. I logged on and they had, I think, about 3 panelists. One was a teacher, librarians who are in the school system are called media specialists, and another was a representative of Lee and Low Publishing Company. And I was very interested. I looked at all the bibliography that they shared. I ordered a book that they recommended, and I felt compelled to do further research. And I was home, I had time. I went to the Library of Congress. I typed in Juneteenth, and I read all of the articles. There were primary sources about Juneteenth from Texas, and I read the newspapers, the family journals that were written. I read everything I could about Juneteenth, and then I was inspired to sit down and write in my journal.
Old school style with a pen and some paper. All right. So then you started writing, and then you attended other writing clubs, and that's where you went through it. You went through time and time again, perfecting the story. So walk us through how that happened.
I joined during COVID. I joined the CSA, which stands for Council of Supervisors and Administrators. They had a writing group. And I joined the writing group. And one day I got up the courage because they would give us prompts. I got up the courage to say, meekly, I said, I've written a story. I'd like to share it online with you. And they were so happy that I opened my mouth and they said, of course, share it, Aletta. And by that time, I had learned how to share screen. So I shared my manuscript and I read it aloud to them. And the educators were looking at me like my students used to look at me. They were enthralled by my manuscript. And that made me feel, gee, I did something good. If I have educators who are listening to me tell this story, well, I was really reading it. And what they do after you write something, they give you feedback. And they went around to each educator. There were approximately 10, and they asked for feedback, what they liked, what I could do better, what might enhance the writing. And again, pen in hand, I took avid notes. And that's how I got Annie and Juneteenth. And I'll continue the story after Artkina has a chance because I did this in 2021. And then Juneteenth became a legal holiday, so I had to change some parts of it.
And I think that there's a lot of really good lessons in there for everyone listening. First, you spoke up. I know that you're kind of a quiet person, and first thing, you had the courage, right, to speak up and to ask for feedback on your work. And that's a really huge lesson for those of us who might, shrink away from attention or maybe shrink away from asking for feedback because sometimes that can hurt, right? And then also another thing that you did, you wrote and you rewrote. So
Yes.
you just kept at it, persistence, right? And then
Yes.
also the third part of this is that you got help. So your daughter helped you out in finding someone who would become instrumental in your quest. And who was that?
Artkina Celestin. My daughter, I shared the manuscript with my daughter, Paulette, and she said, Mommy, it's really good. I said, well, I need an illustrator and a formatter. But Artkina will tell you more about that because when you write, you have a manuscript with words. And I needed it to be transformed into pictures with words underneath or words above. So it would be appropriate for a picture book.
And so, Arkina, you met Miss Aletta. So we're in about 2021 at this point, where you two first met.
I think it
And
was 2020, was it 2022, Kina?
2020.
One?
No, it was 20. That's a good question.
It's a long time.
2020. No, I think it was 2022.
Yes.
so then you guys met, and she shared her manuscript with you. What were your first thoughts?
Well, it was very interesting for me because I've not done a historical fiction yet. So most of the books that I've done prior to this was using illustrations that are a little more, softer or more character focused, that kind of thing. So when she brought this project to me, I was really excited because, like I said, I've never done a historical fiction, and it was going to give me an opportunity to actually do a more realistic type character. And as well, like she said, in terms of the researching, on my end, I had to do a lot of research, and that proved to be a little difficult. Luckily, we don't live. I'm
As an
sorry, go ahead.
illustrator, as an illustrator, what kind of research did you have to do? So we know Miss Aletta had to look up the facts, the story, actually what happened in Texas. So then on your part as an illustrator, what were you looking for?
So on my end, I have to look for what kind of clothes would they have worn, what utensils would they have used, that kind of thing. What would the setting look like? So that was what was actually the difficulty for me. We would have been done a whole lot quicker, but I had to try to find those facts, and they weren't as readily available. A lot of times, the images that you would see would be for a later period, not so much for this time frame. So you just kind of have to play with what you see and kind of, mold it for what you need it to be. Luckily, I live not too far from the African American History Museum that's in DC now. So we were able to take a trip down there, and that helped a little bit too.
Wow. So you got a little bit of a road trip in, got some historical perspective, and then sat down and started creating these characters on paper. So then when you're creating and you're sending things to Miss Aletta and she's sending things back, how's that process work for the two of you?
It was actually pretty good. it can be difficult when you don't have regular communication, but we had great communication. So anytime I would send her images or questions, she would answer right away and let me know what she thought. So that part was pretty easy on that end.
Right. And Miss Aletta, did you have any changes or anything to the characters? Did you like them from the beginning? Any thoughts? How did that work for you?
Well, that is interesting, Gail. I was asked, why did I choose a girl, a little girl? And did I choose a little girl because I have a daughter? And I thought about that because I was never thinking about that before. I am somebody's daughter. And I was telling it from a child's perspective because I've always worked with children my whole life, from pre-K up to middle school. And I can hear their voices. I know how they speak and what they ask for. And because I had done the research, I just envisioned what a little 8-year-old would be saying to her mom.
And as a retired teacher, as a retired principal, as a retired librarian, I see that through thread there of you working with children your whole life. Um, why was it so important to write a children's book? You've done a lot of research at this point. You're in a writing club. You've gotten a lot of feedback from people. Why go that children's route and not maybe a piece of traditional fiction or something for adults?
Thank you, Gail. I went for children because I have masters who have influenced me. Throughout my whole life, I have always read stories to children to encourage them. As a matter of fact, as part of the National Association of University Women, every year we would do a read aloud in different schools and in some daycare centers. I'm accustomed to reading picture books to children, and I just thought that I wanted children to have this information because they're young, and I wanted them to receive the information at that I could provide to them, and it is positive. I didn't want them to feel, oh, another book about how horrible slavery was, and it was.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it wasn't. But I wanted them to hear and understand the story from a child's perspective. And I guess teachers and librarians are always little children. I just love dressing up. I just love special holidays. And I think it's just part of who we are. I just love doing bulletin boards. And I
And
think it's part of who you are.
And I know you wrote this as with Annie as a girl because you are a daughter and you have a daughter, and that's what you know as part of that. And I also noticed that in the book, and this is something that I don't think I've ever seen in another children's book, something else that makes this book so special, in addition to being historical fiction, in addition to being about Juneteenth, which is something that a lot of people are just worrying about. Additionally, you've got that teacher influence in here. In this book, not only is there a glossary of terms, but there's also a bibliography because you've done so much research. Why was it important for you as a teacher, an educator, a librarian, to include both a glossary and a bibliography in a children's book?
Thank you. I wanted to help teachers and librarians when they share the book. I wanted to help them, and therefore I presented questions for discussion that the teachers could ask. But that idea came from sharing it with the supervisors and administrators. After I read my manuscript to them, one of the writers in the group said, Aletta, I think you should have discussion questions for the teachers because a lot of teachers may not know about Juneteenth and they may need a little bit of assistance. Prior to that, I was thinking that the bibliography would be there for the teachers because they have their master's degree and they're accustomed to looking at a bibliography. So I had only included the bibliography. And then from reading other books, I felt that it was important for a glossary to be there because some of the terms the young children may not know. For example, emancipated, which I put free from legal, social, or political restrictions, liberated. I wanted the children, just as we do in Toastmasters, to get a new word, to have a word of the day. So now they have emancipated. And then I also included Juneteenth and plantation and Abraham Lincoln. And so I try to include key words in the glossary.
And also, Miss Aletta, how did the book change after Juneteenth became a holiday?
That was Artkina.
Artkina.
Artkina noticed in my manuscript, which I told you I had read 1,000 times, and I was like, oh, I can't look at it again. But Artkina picked up that I said some states celebrated Juneteenth as a holiday. And Artkina said, Miss Aletta, now it's a holiday, a federal holiday. And I changed it because we have a partnership. She brought things to my attention and I changed the wording. I put a celebration on the Juneteenth, a celebration on the 19th of June commemorating the emancipation of enslaved people in the United States beginning on 1863. Juneteenth, a blending of the words June and 19th, is an annual celebration on June 19th commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. Then I put Juneteenth is now a federal holiday because I didn't have that before.
And Artkina, not only were you instrumental in that line, but you're instrumental in the entire book. Although this is the first time that the two of you have collaborated on a book, you have a long history of art and being an artist. Would you like to tell us about that?
Well, my drawing abilities, I guess you could call it, go all the way back to when I was like age 3, sitting with my grandfather drawing. And it just, I progressively got better as time went on. My parents put me in programs to help support that. And then I also attended arts focused middle and high school. And, it ended up being where at the time when I graduated high school, I didn't want to focus on art because that whole mindset of starving artist, that kind of thing. But as I continued on, working for the federal government, it started to nag at me and I really needed to do something with it. And I've always loved like animation and illustration. So this was like a perfect fit.
And I know I've asked you this before, but your name, A-R-T, Artkina. It's as if you were destined, and that is your real name, your given name.
That is my government name.
Yes. And it's as if you were destined to be an artist.
I think so, yeah.
But so again,
like we discussed, I was named after my father, Arthur, and my mother just happened to find the Kina part in the baby book, and she put the two together.
Wonderful. So it was destined from birth.
Yes.
I love it. So Miss Aletta, I know that you mentioned earlier that part of your writing process, you drew upon what you know from reading aloud through the National Association of University Women, of which you are a member, and how you do literacy programs through NAUW, National Association of University Women. And I know that you have 2 National Association of University Women, with you here today on the panel. And they are Dr. Yvette Morgan and Melinda Cashwell. And it's my pleasure right now to introduce the two of them. They are going to be doing a dramatic reading from Annie and Juneteenth. So Dr. Yvette Morgan will be playing the mom, and Melinda Cashwell will be playing, of course, Annie. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Annie and her mother from Annie and Juneteenth.
Mama, what's he saying?
Hush, girl. I'm trying to listen and understand what that Union soldier saying. What is he reading?
Mama asked the person standing next to her. She responded, something about a decree from that President Abraham Lincoln.
Mama, who are all these men with him? I'm scared, Mama. Master don't look happy. He looks mad.
Hush and sit down on the grass. Don't even look up at Master. Keep your eyes down.
The Union Army soldier, Gordon Granger, read, "This proclamation declares that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are and henceforth shall be free." There were about 2,000 Union troops, both black and white, who arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865. The Army announced that the more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state of Texas were free by executive decree issued by President Abraham Lincoln. The Union soldiers began posting copies of the decree on the trees throughout the area. Some of the black soldiers who were former slaves that joined the Union Army went into the crowd of black formerly enslaved people and said, "So, you're free to go. You don't have to work on the master's plantation anymore. You're free to go. You're free." Annie's mother looked at one of the black soldiers and said,
Free to do what? Free to go where? Am I free to send my Annie to school? Am I free to look for other children that Master sold away? Am I free so that I do not have to work from sun up until sundown in the fields picking cotton and carrying it to the top of my head to be weighed and then putting through the cotton grit? Free to do what? Free to go where?
and we're going to stop there. Thank you so much. We have to take these actresses on the road.
Indeed. Everyone give it up, please, for Melinda Cashwell and Yvette Morgan playing Annie and her mother as dramatized from Annie and Juneteenth by Miss Aletta Seales and illustrated by Artkina Celestin. Oh, a nice graphic there, Miss Aletta. So we have a few more questions. And also at this time, I'd like to open it up. If you have any questions at all, you can either drop them in the chat or raise your hand, unmute yourself, and you can ask a question yourself. One of the great things about these library programs is that we are able to interact with people who are doing the things that maybe somewhere deep down inside we'd like to try, or we know someone who would like to try. So this is your time to maybe get a little bit of advice from people who have taken the leap. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and or just ask, unmute yourself and ask. And while we wait for people to gather up a little bit of courage, Artkina, question for you. What advice would you give to young aspiring artists, especially artists of color, on how to get started and how to take the leap like you did? You had a government job, and you took the leap. What advice would you give to people finding themselves in that same situation?
Well, first off, I think the important thing, even for authors, is to take a look at other children's books that are already out there, especially the ones that may have won awards, that kind of thing. You can take the time to just practice drawing characters over and over and over again, because that is a major part of illustration, is being able to translate that character in different views. So I would say first, start off. Copying is a great way, not like necessarily just sketching over whatever someone has drawn, but just looking at what they have done and try to work it in your style and your way and move from there. And then there's tons of resources on YouTube and at the library. Definitely start there.
And also seek out someone locally.
Yes, that helps too.
The power of mentorship.
And also there are tons of resources in terms of organizations. You've got the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. That's a good way to start. Your local arts associations, because there are groups. Unfortunately, I don't think we have one here where I live in Maryland, but Baltimore has one where there's like comic book artists and illustrators, they get together. So those are good resources as well. Or even your local art school.
Thanks, Artkina. And Jackie Carr said beautiful reading and, of course, beautiful illustrations. She can visualize the events. And Elaine also chimed in and said this is powerful and it should be required in each and every school. And Josephine also agrees. She said she would love to see this kind of dramatization in every school. So ladies, you might have to take your scarves on the road, your headscarves on the road for dramatic readings at local schools, as per Josephine as well. And Crystal says congratulations to Aletta and Artkina on your wonderful book, and of course to our dramatist today, that you brought the book to life. And also, Evelyn has a question for you, Miss Aletta. She says that she'd like to know what sparked you to start. Now, I know you've been keeping a journal your whole life, basically. What had sparked you to keep a journal? And then what inspired you to keep going with your journal?
I kept a journal because I am quiet and I felt comfortable writing my feelings in a journal. I remember reading the diary of Anne Frank, and I said, oh, I can keep a journal of everything that happens in my life. But what really sparked me was the New York City Department of Education sent me to Teachers College writing program. And I shared a story that I had written about a former student. I changed the student's name, but I shared some of the things that I had observed this student do. It was a story on bullying. I shared it with my teacher at the writing project, and she said, do you know, her name was Shelley Harway. She said, do you know you are the only one in the writing program that wrote a story about a child, and everybody is a teacher. And she said, you are a good writer. And that stayed in my head. You know, when somebody tells you something good, it stays in. And when somebody tells you something negative, it stays in. And every time I would see children involved in some type of situation that touched my heart, I said, I can write a story about that. And that's what sparked me to change my journal writing into manuscript writing. But this story is historical fiction. The Queen's Library, thanks to a librarian colleague, cataloged it as a holiday story, and it has a J on the spine because it's juvenile, and that means it's for the children. And the library has it there. So I had written that it was historical fiction, and I hope that the schools will accept it. I made it available to schools and libraries, would accept it and teach it as historical fiction.
So it is available right now in Cambria Heights Library and other Queens Public Libraries as well?
Yes, it's cataloged by the Queens Public Library.
And
And I
Pamela,
have to give thanks to the librarian who did that, who ran with it, because you are what the people around you do. And I shared it with one of the librarians and Suli Zakem, and she said, Mrs. Seales, I like your book. I'm going to submit it and see if the Queens Public Library would accept it. And the rest is history. They did.
and it's available now on the bookshelves as a children's book, cataloged under holiday, but it's also part of our our shared history. And before we let you go, Miss Aletta, a few other things. First of all, you're not just Miss Aletta children's book author now. You are Miss Aletta award-winning children's book author. Could you tell us about that?
Again, that is my network of people. I shared it with my librarian network. They're part of the New York Black Librarian Caucus. And when I was at Queens College, I joined the New York Black Librarian Caucus. And I shared it with them, and two of the librarians were so kind to me. And it's the kindness of the people in your circle. They submitted my book to the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. And the Black Caucus listed it as the best of the best books for children in grades 5 through 8. And I am honored. I am honored for my colleagues, my friendship, and I'm honored for the circle that surrounds me. One of the librarians was Sandra Michelle Echoes, who was a former president of the New York Black Librarians Caucus. And another librarian was a library manager was Richard Ashby, who is now the manager of the Sharon Hill Library. And I just want to share an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. And I surround myself with a beautiful network of people who have taken my book far. Thank you.
Again, so many things there, so many great life lessons. Thanks again, Miss Aletta. And you did mention Queens College in there. You went back to Queens College as an adult. That's again another thing that's taking the leap, like writing your book and finding an illustrator and attending writing COVID, all of those things. So you went back to Queens College as an adult. Tell us about that and what did you ultimately get your degree in and when?
I originally graduated from Queens College with my bachelor's degree and my master's degree. And when I retired from the New York City Department of Education, I wanted to fill my life with more learning. And I had worked in the library as a teacher, but I didn't have they call it a master's in library science or a master's in library information and science. I had my teaching degree. And I wanted that, so I took courses at Queens College because I knew my way around. I knew my way around the campus. And I went back as an adult and I enjoyed the courses. And that's how I learned the computer because I'm from the generation we didn't have computer for cell phones. So when I went back to Queens College, it was a new world for me. I had to do everything online and I had to do research online. And even though I went to their library and they had books, real books, I had to do a lot of reading online. As a professor, you know, the professors loved to assign us readings that were online. So I had to learn. And I'm so grateful. I am so grateful. I told the story at Toastmasters that when I retired, one of my friends said to me, "Why are you going back to school, Aletta? Why don't you go on cruises?" And I said, "I like cruises, but I like school." So I went back to school. I like learning, and I consider myself a lifelong learner. Whereas cruises, I have never really been on a cruise, but I have seen people and listened to people who have been on cruises. And I think you have to do what you are directed to do because that was the best thing for me to go back to library school. I met a new network of people who became not just my colleagues, but my friends. And it gave me an opportunity to hone in on my research skills.
Thank you,
Back
Miss
to
Aletta.
you, Gail.
Thank you, Miss Aletta. And also, thank you for the inspiring story of retiring and then going back for another master's degree. That's very inspiring to so many of us. And Pamela Dixon just wanted to chime in and say thank you for making our story come alive for children. Um, and also that, you know, all children in America should be. And Miss Angela Stubbs, of course, gives you congratulations too, as does Crystal Brown, who also adds that you are a fantastic role model for all women, but most especially for the seniors who can see possibilities for their own next chapter, just like you just said with your master's degree as a retired person. Amazing. And Nicole says you are truly inspiring. Thank you for being yourself, letting your light shine. And she has a question for you. How can other teachers, schools, parents, aunties, uncles, community leaders further spread the word?
I'm going to say thank you first for all the compliments. I have gray hair under this. It's covered, but it's all gray. And I'm grateful for it. I want to share what I know. I know that reading aloud works, exposure to books works, taking children on trips works. I heard Artkina say that her family went to the African American Museum in Washington. Museum trips, that works. It sparks children, young people. When I went to the Museum of African American History, it sparked my interest because I went to a school where they had desks and chairs nailed down to the floor. And then I taught in a school where we could move desks around. So I'm grateful. I've lived a long time and seen a lot of different changes in the school system. And I think school libraries are a must. I remember sitting in District 5 where I started teaching in Manhattan in a school library. And at that time, the children could gather around me on the floor. And I remember the book I was reading to them. It was a book about Harriet Tubman. And they must have been third graders. They were in awe. First of all, had a different voice. I had a younger voice. They were listening to my voice, and I just looked at their beautiful faces, and they were just in awe at my reading of the book and trying to make the character of Harriet Tubman come alive for them. I hope I responded correctly to that question.
There are no wrong answers, Miss Aletta. As a teacher, I can hear you in my head saying that. Josephine also continues with her congratulations on your honor. And Ms. Philpotts, Valerie Philpotts, says that Yvette and Melinda, you have a future in dramatic presentations, as does, and Jacqueline Carr also joins in the congratulations. And how you give praises to everyone who helped you along the way. That is something you always do reach back. And Danielle says, thanks again to all the volunteers and the library and to you for being so gracious today and inviting us inside your home. And so I'd like to close by saying thank you to Artkina Celestin. Artkina, what's next for you?
Thank you so much. Right now I'm actually trying to focus on figuring out if I want to put my hand in writing. My daughter did write a book and we published that as well. So we're just trying to figure out if we want to move further with that or how, if she's over the book writing phase of her life. I don't know. So we'll see. But yeah, just more creation.
Okay. And so where can we follow you, Artkina?
I am at www.moartcee.com and at moartsy, which is what I just spelled out, on Facebook and Instagram.
Great. And you can drop it in the chat if you'd like.
Oh,
And
okay, awesome.
thank you. And to our two dramatic dramatists, Dr. Yvette Morgan from the National Association of University Women, and also Melinda Cashwell from the National Association of University Women. We will look for you on a panel doing dramatic readings maybe around the neighborhood soon. Well, they're open to it. And thanks for dropping that link in the chat, Artkina. And Melinda and Yvette, if you have any, if you would like everyone to follow you, you can feel free to put your links in the chat. And lastly, Miss Aletta, thank you for spending the afternoon with us here at Queens Public Library. What's next for you, Miss Aletta?
Well, I told Artkina I'm bringing her with me wherever I go. And I have another manuscript. I had written many years ago a book about Absalom Jones, and it was published in the St. David's Speak magazine. And I always wanted it as a children's book. It's another historical fiction book, but I always wanted it as a children's book to be illustrated. And I'm thinking about pushing that forward. Then I have another idea. So I have a few manuscripts that I'm thinking of giving to Artkina. I want to keep Artkina busy doing artwork, and my artwork is historical fiction.
And that is St. David's Church in Cambria Heights. So I want to make sure that I shout them out as well. Thanks again, Miss Aletta. Thank you to the entire panel. And most especially, thank you to everyone who took an hour out of your Saturday to spend some time with Miss Aletta and friends here at Queens Public Library. I'm going to turn it back over to our host, Casper. I know that he is probably feverishly giving out those Mets library cards free today, and they are free at the library. Casper, how's it going there?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this was a great program. We're so excited. Congratulations. I was so happy to watch. And I was here with Danielle, our children's librarian. We also had a customer come in. She thought it was an in-person program. So I set up the projector. So she's actually watching it on the projector in the library. So we're so excited. And we hope to have many more of these author talks with Ms. Seales. So thank you so much.
Thanks to everyone for joining us today. For everyone at Queens Library, Miss Aletta, Artkina, And the rest of our amazing panel, Dr. Yvette Morgan and Melinda Cashwell and myself, thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again real soon. Good night, everyone.